Today we'll take a look at the Impaler build for Shadow of the Erdtre. I really wanted a Mesmer build ever since the character first got revealed, and I'm happy to say that the DLC actually adds a bunch of items that make this a very strong selection. It's one of the highest damage dealers I've seen in the DLC, can really reach some amazing stagger potential, and luckily it also implements a number of very strong new incantations that can definitely work really well. Plus, I will say this, the drip is really awesome, so let's jump right into it. Now, this build makes use of a number of very strong new weapons and skills, like I said. Specifically, we're going to make use of the Fire Knight's Greatsword, which is possibly one of the best new weapons in the DLC and definitely a top pick. And we're going to couple this with the new Mesmer Fire incantations, which some of them have some great utility, some even great damage at a very low FP cost. But specifically that Fire Knight's Greatsword, when you imbue it with something like the new Flame Skewer or the Flame Spear, it deals some insane damage, plus it gets a nice fire buff for about like 10 to 20 seconds, which further increases its damage even more. This, with the flame art and a bit of dip into faith, makes it an absolutely crazy damage dealer, definitely one of the highest in the DLC, and I'm seeing like 7-8k damage for bosses early on. It's really a top tier pick through and through. Another option is of course going to be the Fire Serpent, but there are two more on top of this. Fire Serpent is basically the Glintstone Pebble equivalent for incantations. Very low FP cost, very quick cast, you can also charge it or quick cast it, and in both of the situations it deals very good damage. 1 to 2000 for the uncharged version and 2000 plus for the charged version depending on the enemy resistances. We can also add Mesmer's Orb from his Remembrance. This is basically the same attack that he does against you at the start of the fight. It's basically the same charge up follow up with the explosion, and the damage on it is really great, plus the poise break is also really good. However, its biggest downside is that it's very easily interruptible, so you're going to constantly want to take enemies by surprise with this or look out for openings. And then there's also the Rain of Fire. This is situationally okay, decent at applying pressure, but not really needed for the build, only for the flavor. And all of these actually get boosted by, of course, Mesmer's headpiece as well as the new Fire Knight chest piece. Plus, of course, you can further buff this with the new seal that you get, which further buffs Mesmer's fire incantations for some nice damage. Now, to make this work better, you're going to want to constantly rely on that Fire Knight's Greatsword, and specifically if you use this with the Spear Ash of War, you're going to want to aim that tip pretty much to hit the enemy's hitbox. Specifically because this way you can ensure you're going to hit it both with the physical end of the sword as well as with the magical fire start of that Flame Spear. Point at which you're going to notice that it basically deals that double damage, which is going to go in like the high 5, 6, 7, 8,000 easily, especially when you're fully buffed, going with the Flame Grant Me Strength and the Golden Vow. Besides this, its R1 is basically the same as that Godslayer Greatsword, so basically a very fast series of R1 taps which are going to constantly catch enemies immediately after your heaviest hits. Plus, the poise break is really great over here. You're going to be stunning enemies within 1 or 2 max R1s after the strong skewer, or well, in this case, spear. Besides this, you can also use the Fire Serpent to just take down trash mobs. Like I said, this is really great with its very low FP consumption, and it's also pretty decent at applying pressure against targets. However, be careful because its range is not going to be the biggest. So let's go over the build itself. Like I said, we're using the Fire Knight's Greatsword, and you can easily farm this from, well, the only Fire Knight with it right here very close to the storehouse first floor. You can basically take the lift back down from the path you just used from, the previous side of Grace, and you're going to end up right behind it. So it's going to give you a few free shots against it to more easily farm this. It's going to take a while, but this way you can also get the Fire Knight's armor set, which is again going to give you some boosts, at least as long as you get the chest piece. For a quicker route, if you want the full armor set, you can also start at the storehouse 7th floor. There are about like 5 enemies very close to one another in like a couple of floors. However, they only drop the armor, not really the new Greatsword. For the other 2 items, you can actually get the Fire Knight Seal as well as the Fire Serpent pretty much on the same route by basically making your way to the eastern parts of the Shadow Keep and going towards the Church District entrance. You're going to need to approach that from the cliffs onto the opposite side. So for the seal, we can actually find it behind a Marika statue in the submerged church, but for that we're going to need to just drain the water in the area. So simply make your way using these rooftops up until eventually you reach some of these higher columns for the nearby cathedral. Jump on one of its rails and make your way inside via the collapsed rooftop. And from this point on, you're going to exit the first big room and immediately take it to your left side. And from this point on, just follow the path and then take it to the second left up the stairs, going past a bunch of bat enemies. All the way until the final room where you're going to notice there's a bunch of ladders bringing you to a balcony above. Here is where you can use this lever to basically just drain the water in the area. And from this point on, simply drop down and then enter the room behind you. Use some of these platforms to reach the lower levels below. You can also enter the nearby side of Grace to save, but from that point on, backtrack a little bit and then take it to your right side. Follow up this path and go up the stairs. You're going to go to the left then, and from this point on, you're going to find behind this Marika statue the seal right in front of you. For the Serpent fire incantations, we'll need to make our way to the storehouse back section, which is going to be again following the same route. However, instead of taking the first to the left upon exiting the first door, you're actually going to want to push further and go to the second exit to the left and basically take the elevator upstairs. Once you are here, you're going to want to make it to the left side and simply continue up until you activate the side of Grace. Once you're done, simply head over a bit further away. To your right, you're going to notice a bunch of ladders, so make your way all the way at the top. And just follow the straight path up these stairs and then go past the bookshelves up until the next room in the back. Here is where you're going to encounter that Fire Serpent spell right on this corpse. Now for the Rain of Fire, you can make your way towards the west rampart and go over the bigger bridge, basically up until the end of it, where you're going to encounter Salsa the Fire Knight. She's going to be the one that drops it, but you're going to need to start again at this storehouse first floor side of Grace and then go to the left, take the elevator downstairs. From this point on, you're going to want to follow the same route as I do to basically make your way towards the cellar area. Just ignore all the jar enemies trying to ambush you and essentially make your way towards west so that you can eventually reach the bridge. Once you are here, you're going to have a side of Grace as well as a smaller door on the right side that you can access to the bridge area. And from this point on, continue further up until you reach the enemy, defeat it, and that new incantation is yours. Just to show you how insane the attack rating on this can get, not only is it already high, but with just a few buffs from your, well, spells and your physics potion plus the weapon art itself, you're going to easily reach 3000 plus attack rating, which is what explains the huge damage, especially against bosses that don't really have any innate fire resistance. I mean, even Renala gets like 5-6,000 damage per hit, on top of the fact that this is so easy to break enemy stances and get them staggered immediately. In terms of attributes, we're going with the typical 60 into Vigor so that we can survive for longer, 22 into Mind so that we can spam all of our abilities, which are already pretty low cost, so you can sacrifice a couple of points in there, and maybe put them into Endurance, go with at least 24, maybe even 26 or 28, and squeeze in a couple of extra dodges. Obviously, Strength and Faith are our main damage attributes, going 50 and 65 respectively, slightly favoring Faith in this case since we're going with the Flame Art. This way, we can take advantage of the already high innate fire damage on the Fire Knight's Greatsword. So this way, you can easily reach like almost 4000 damage, maybe even more when fully buffed with everything. And everything else can remain the same. Dexterity just needs to be 18 so that you can have the minimum attribute requirements for the Fire Knight's Greatsword. For our armors, all of them actually buff the damage on especially the Mesmer incantations. So the chest piece in this case from the Fire Knight set boosts that by 5%. Then we can use the Mesmer helmet, which is going to give you another 3%. Or you can go with the Fire Knight helmet and gain a bunch of HP, a bit of stamina, and a bit of equip load. Not too much, but it is quite welcomed. And then the two remaining pieces with the Rakshasa set for the gloves and the greaves, which are going to be another 2% for your all damage per piece, which is not too bad. That should be about like 10% between all of them. Other items that we're using is the Fire Scorpion Charm for a 12% damage increase. We also use the Godfrey icon. Since our Ash of War is charged, it's going to get another like 15% increase. Shard of Alexander for another like 15, and then finally I added a two-handed sword talisman. Now this doesn't really buff the Ash of War damage, but it does buff the weapon damage, and we're going to be using regular hits with it as well, especially the R1 chain, which, as I've said, is really great. Now, you can totally use the skewer instead of the spear. However, in PvE, I found that the spear is much better. You can still use the skewer. It has a slightly higher angle, so it doesn't really reach that far away, but it does reach targets that are a bit further up. So fighting against bosses at their feet can be really good. Plus, it has that true combo, which you can follow up with a quick L1. So that can actually apply a bit more pressure. But personally, I think that would be better in PvP and keep the, well, spear for PvE. Anyway, that is about it with the video. Let me know down below, are you using the Mesmer build as well, or are you going with a different setup for this? In the meantime, thanks much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.